Just wanted to welcome everybody here. Thank you all for coming. Good crowd, it looks like, so it should be a fun day. Just wanted to, again, thank you all for being here. I look forward to the good and spirited conversations for the rest of the next couple of days. I won't bother with the decorum. Probably everybody here is comfortable with that. So you know how it is. The decorum is everybody play respectful and nice. So that being said, let's go ahead and kick off roll call.
This is for the Joint Revenue Interim Committee meeting on Monday, August 31st, 2026. Senator Case. Senator Dockstader.
Here.
Senator Ide.
Here.
Senator Pappas. Representative Brown.
Here.
Representative Campbell.
Here.
Representative Lean.
Present.
Representative Lucas.
Present.
Representative Riggins.
Here.
Representative Storer. Representative Stivar.
Present.
Representative Ward.
Excused, he's on his way.
Co-Chairman McEwen.
Excused and should be here in a few minutes.
Chairman Locke.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
All right. Very good. Well, thank you very much. And we'll go ahead and get started right off the bat here. I believe the first order of business is approval of the minutes. So committee, what's your pleasure? Any motion?
Don't move.
Senator Dockstader moved the minutes. Representative went completely blank. Riggins seconded that. Lights are on. Nobody's home here. I'm sorry, everybody, but all right. Committee, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Well, that got that out of the way. So we'll move into our first portion of the meeting here. Basically property tax review. And I assume we're probably starting with Department of Revenue to basically talk about some of the numbers that I know you were not able to present last time. So hopefully we can dive into that a little bit deeper in this meeting. Welcome and thank you for being here, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Ken Gill with the Department of Revenue, Administrator of the Property Tax Division. If it's okay with the chairman, I thought I'd walk through some of the handouts that were provided in your packet. I'd start with the comparison of state and local assessed valuation for the years 25 and 26. It's a sheet, looks kind of like this here. You'll notice on this sheet, Mr. Chairman, when we supplied this in June, the abstract hearings with the State Board of Equalization had not been completed yet. So those were a draft copy. These are actual numbers that were approved by the State Board of Equalization for each county assessor and for our state assessed minerals and public utilities and utility companies. So if you'll notice, the first three columns are your state assessed, and it's a comparison of the assessed value from 25 and 26, and the amount it either went up or went down. Then the next three columns are your local assessed, so that would be our county assessors, the assessment that they performed during tax year 2026. And then the last three columns are a total of both state and local combined. We pulled these soon after the state board had approved all the values for the county assessors. And I would stand for any questions on that sheet, Mr. Chairman.
Questions? Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for joining us today. My question is about the state assessed and how it came out negative from 26 to 25. Can you talk to me about some of the federal regulations and if those played a part in some of this when it comes to things like obsolescence reports?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean, typically because these include minerals, that's why you're probably going to see the most drop there or raise in certain cases. For our state assessed utilities, railroads, things like that, they stayed pretty flat from the previous year. So I don't, to answer your question, I'm not sure on the federal regulations, if there was any cause in that drop.
Other questions for Mr. Gill? Mr. Gill, if you can just give me just a quick moment here. I'm sorry, I'm just looking this over a little bit. Sorry, go ahead. You can, I just wanted to kind of look this over a little tiny bit, but, so if you can, I mean, I'm looking at the slides, but if you can summarize just a little bit, it would just be a little helpful for me, because I'm looking at this. I want to make sure I understand the columns. I'm not sure, am I looking at the right slide here?
So the title, Mr. Chairman, is Comparison of State and Local Assessed Valuation for years 26-2025.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, it was me being a little bit off there, but, so just to make sure I'm reading everything correctly, the difference between 26, so it's a up 1.2 billion, is that right? Am I reading that right, or am I losing?
Mr.
that?
Chairman, you are reading that correctly, and that would be on your locally assessed side.
Okay,
And in our next couple slides that we'll have, that'll kind of be explained.
okay. Perfect, that's great. Thank you. That's helpful. I just want to make sure I understood those numbers. Thank you.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. If it's fine with you, we could move on to the next
Please.
set that was included in
Any
your
other
packet.
questions, just to make sure? Ms. Storr, or Representative Storr, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gill, maybe you're getting there, but just it would be helpful, I think, to just explain the change on the state assessed and the changes on the locally assessed and the reasons for those that you see. Thank you.
Mr. Gill, please.
Mr. Chairman, on the locally assessed, some of that is going to be due to the 25% homeowners exemption that wasn't applied for 2026. If the committee remembers, in 2025, all single-family residential properties and the associated land received the 25%. In 2026, the homes that were owner occupied had to apply for that to receive the 25%. And if you'll remember from the last meeting that we had in Gillette, about 45% of eligible owner occupied single family dwellings and associated land, about 44% that were eligible actually applied.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. And just were you able to make any kind of, I'm sorry, Representative Storr, did you have a follow-up, please? Okay. Quick one on that. What was your estimate? My recollection was your estimate was approximately 50% of the people may have missed it. That was I'm trying to recall exactly in the last meeting. Is that kind of how it ended up? Is that your estimate? Is that still fairly accurate?
Mr. Chairman, it's more than 50%.
Okay.
There were about 44 to 45% that were eligible that actually applied. So it was more like 55%.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Gill. Just, can you kind of walk me through, is that the decrease, the 350 million decrease on the state side, is that all just directly to the property tax reduction? I just don't understand that. I see Converse County dropped on the state asset 215 million, but they're one of our biggest extraction states. So please just help me kind of put my mind around what's happening there, please.
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, part of it will be the $75,000 exemption on personal property. So that's going to be a part on our state assess that my department does with the railroads, the public utilities, the airlines, that sort of thing. So some of it will be attributed to the $75,000 personal property exemption. Speaking specifically to Converse County, I know we have a friend in the audience here that could probably tell us what happened with the state assessment, but I have a feeling that it might have been a mineral.
Follow up? All right, very good. If there's no other questions, please proceed.
Thank you,
Thank you
Mr.
for taking
Chairman.
a few minutes catching us up.
We have a couple more handouts that were in your packet that was mailed to you by LSO. They're both titled 2025 Assessed Value Residential Exemptions and 2026 Assessed Value Residential Exemptions. So if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, I thought I'd start with the 2025. You've seen these numbers. The amount exempted in tax dollars, I did break this out per your request, Mr. Chairman, and actually give you an estimate of tax dollars that were exempted for 2025. And you'll notice for the cap, which will be the first two columns on the 2025 sheet, about 45,554,915 was exempted. That is an estimate. Keep in mind, I'm using the countywide average mill levy. So some mill levies for some properties will be higher than that. Some will be lower, depending on where they live and what authorities serve them. Then the next two columns, you'll notice the homeowner's exemption, also known as the 25% exemption. We exempted about 100 million, almost just short of 100 million in 2025. The next one would be the long-term homeowners exemption, also known as the 50% exemption for those folks that are 65 and older and have paid property tax for 25 years or more. And you'll notice we exempted statewide about 45.5 million statewide. To total up, the total estimated tax dollars exempted in 2025 was just over 190 million. So if we turn to the 2026 page now, very different from 2025. We'll notice the cap, the 4% cap, the first two columns. We exempted about 53.5 million. For the 25% exemption, we exempted 31,600,000. If you'll notice in 25, it was almost 100 million. So that one dropped quite a bit due to folks not signing up for the 25% exemption for their homes. The long-term homeowners, it did increase by about 8 million. It went from 45.5 to 53.2 in 2026. And the total, you'll notice in 2026, we exempted 138.5 million compared to 190.5 in 2025. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand for any questions on those sheets.
Questions for Mr. Gill? Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you just walk me through the 4% cap when we're looking at these numbers of the 860 million that's exempted in line 1 on 2026? Is that the entire percentage amount of everything beyond the 4% cap, or is that just the 4% cap?
Mr. Chairman, great question, Representative Lean. That, as you know, in 3911-105, this body passed in 2024 an order of operations for these exemptions. So we start with the percentages. We start with the lowest percentage and go to the next highest percentage, and then we apply anything that is a dollar amount afterwards. So that would be the total 4% cap. Now, I must say, Representative Lean, that 4% cap is kind of accumulative because we're always looking back at the full fair market value. So we've dealt with the cap now for what, 23, 24, 25, and 26, or maybe it was 24, 25, and 26. I don't remember. But that's accumulating, right? Because we're always looking back to that full fair actual value. So it is an accumulation. The cap, should it continue, I would assume that we'll be close to $1 billion in assessed value come 2027, or very close to it.
Other questions? Representative Ride.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ken, being here. You're always full of a lot of information. On the long-term homeowners, the 50% exemption, this is probably as good a time as any to bring it up. how will that be affected? Say the People's Initiative of 50% gets passed and dealt with in the legislature on how to fine tune that. How will that affect the long-term homeowners, the ballot initiative that we're looking at? I know that, maybe the land's not included on the ballot initiative where it would be, and any other differences than that. Thank you.
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, great question. Last year in last session, this body passed a law that says you can't take them both. So you can't have the long-term homeowners and the People's Initiative should it pass in November. So that was one step that this body made, an effort to make them not stackable, I think was the term that was used during the session. So you're correct. The People's Initiative only exempts 50% of the dwelling. So the folks in most cases that are currently receiving the long-term homeowners, they'll probably stay with the long-term homeowners and not worry about the People's Initiative and applying for it. But there are certain counties out there where that land is valuable, but the home is very valuable also. So the 50% off the home might be a better choice for those folks, and they'll just have to make that choice. And I'm sure the local assessors will help them walk through which one would benefit them the most.
Senator, follow up? Of course.
So I guess that effectively answers my question. I think so. They will have the choice of keeping the long-term versus the 50% just on the structure with the ballot initiative.
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. They will have that choice. If they've already signed up for the long-term homeowners, as you know, in the last session, you passed that the renewal for that long-term homeowners, you made much easier for the applicant. They can simply call in and say, hey, I still qualify. So as long as they still qualify for the long-term homeowners, they'll have an easier time applying for that. The People's Initiative will need an application too. I will say the People's Initiative is a little different than the long-term homeowners in that it doesn't include the land. It includes 6 months residency from the previous year, which if you remember in the last session, you allowed those long-term homeowners to count years in 25 and months in 25, months in 26, combine them for the 8-month residency requirement. So the People's Initiative is actually 6 months the previous year. So if you were to purchase your home in August of 2025, let's say that People's Initiative is in place, you placed it in August of 2025, you might not meet that requirement for the People's Initiative.
Representative Riggins, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gill, where do they do the calculations for property tax refund program and veterans exemption? Are they included in these calculations at all? I don't think so. Are they?
Mr. Gill.
Chairman, Representative Riggins, they're not included in it. Folks can apply for all of it. They can receive the property tax refund program. It's a refund, keep in mind. So it's looking back. They can get the long-term homeowners or the 25% homeowners. They can get the veterans exemption. Excuse me. So yes, they can get them all.
Representative Riggins, please.
Do we have any idea? Maybe it's not even your department. Maybe it's more county consideration. If there are increased applications for that, because I got the sense that I've met some people who never applied for it before, and if it's becoming more popular, and are we keeping track of what those numbers are?
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, Director Fanning just brought those numbers up hot off the press.
It's teamwork.
We are down a little bit from last year. If I keep in mind now, we're refunding 2025's taxes right now. So we're down from the refund. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. We're down from the refund from last year. Of course, the amount refunded last year, we refunded almost 15 million for 2024 taxes. In 2025, we're going to refund just over 9 million. And the reason for that is the taxes went down in 2025 because of the 25% being applied across the board. So our applications are down from about, let's see, total applications. Sorry, I hadn't looked at the sheet yet, Mr. Chairman.
No worries. You take your time, brother.
We're down from about 15,000 to about 13,006. So 15,300 to 13,600.
Any other questions for Mr. Gill on this? Representative Storer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gill, I want to go back to the 4% cap if I could. And just want to make sure everyone understands that I think you said that most likely the 4% cap, because it applies to all residential property, and it looks back to the original where we put the cap on, that number is likely to increase every year, correct?
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Storer, that is correct. It will increase every year. It becomes a cumulative, almost, for the lack of a better term, snowball effect.
Follow up.
Storer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also note that the percentage of exemption continues to go up in Teton County. Just looking at 25, in 2025, that was about 55.5% of the total exemption came from Teton County in 2025, and in 2026, that rose to 59%. So clearly, that's having a significant impact on the total 4%, and I would assume that is also likely to continue to go up based on our property values. Is that correct?
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Storer, that is absolutely. Teton is almost 2/3 amount of the cap currently.
Thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Gill? Quick question I have. So talking about the cap, one of the things about the cap, and I understand it's an exemption. It's a definite exemption. We definitely have to calculate it, and we definitely do. One thing to keep in mind is one of the things that the cap is doing, at least in my opinion, and this is how it looks, it wasn't like the 25% where we went back in and we slashed a certain dollar amount off the top. Basically what it did is it stopped the growth. So a lot of people play that 4% card as this is money that was slashed from our budgets. In fact, what it did is it controlled money that was additional growth to the budget, in my opinion. And I'm certainly open for your discussion on that if that's something you want to respond to, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that's what it was placed in place for, but it is still an exemption that is a loss to those authorities, that their cost is going up also, maybe more than 4% for some taxing authorities.
Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Gill? So another question for you on these numbers, and just talking about the, I'm going to look at the 25%, the homeowner, which was 99%. You talked about it being about 45%. So we were, in 2026, it dropped to basically 31 million, right? Tax. I'm looking at the tax number, of course. So we would have been looking at probably what, 70 million-ish? Does that sound ballpark right? Or 70 something million. So it would have been a little bit below the 99, but we're still, in terms of eligible people, let me back up and qualify that question. In terms of eligible people, that's 70%, 70, I couldn't remember, 70, 73. Couldn't remember what you estimate as the eligible.
So, Mr. Chairman, in Wyoming, using EAD analysis, every county is different, of course, but statewide, it's about 72%
Okay.
of folks actually own or occupy their home. And it varies by county. You know, you look at an Albany County, it's around 50%. Laramie County is around 72%. Weston County is, I think, close to 90% or maybe just over 90%. So it varies by county. And when we break these down, we adjust for that. When we do fiscal notes during the session, we adjust for that owner occupied per county.
Thank you. So, and just to qualify, so I know this is a rough estimate. This is not exact. So that 72 million-ish was what it would have that would have been a ballpark had all of the eligible folks requested that exemption.
Mr. Chairman, I would anticipate that if we had 100% participation in the 25%, we would have been just over the 99 million from the previous year in tax dollars. If you notice, if you go one column to the left, in 2025, it was 1.4 billion was exempted. Now 2025, all single-family residential structures and their associated land got the exemption. In 2026, 462 million. So that program dropped by $1 billion in exemption in assessed value.
Dropped by $1 billion, but it would have dropped anyway. If I think it would have dropped anyway, just because of the owner occupied. So even if 100% had requested it, right? So I'm just trying to understand those two tax numbers, because if we were looking at 99% last year, well, let's see here, how much dropped by. So it's kind of funny. You look at that, 462 million versus the drop by that $1 billion. So even if all of the qualifying people had registered, you think it would have been over the 99 million, or you think it would have been closer to the 70 something million? I'm just trying to, I realize I'm asking it an estimate really bad here, but your thoughts?
No, Mr. Chairman, I think it probably would have been very similar to the 99 million in tax dollars. Of course, levies change all the time. You know, we had a county vote in a senior citizen service district this year. So as mill levies change, it could go up and down. You have colleges that have bonds that the voters have approved. That bond could be dropped. In fact, we had a college, their bond went away this year. So it could vary, but I think it would have been very close to that 99 million as a whole, and probably close to that 1.4 billion assessed dollars had everyone that was eligible applied.
And just for clarification, so you don't think that taking that 28% off of the top would have made that much of a difference? So in other words, you're saying that the overall taxing, even with that 28% that couldn't apply, you think it still would have been that high? That's your estimate?
I see where you're coming from now, Mr. Chairman. You're right. No, it probably wouldn't have been as high. You're right. It probably would have went down. You're 70 million, 75 million. That's probably a pretty good estimate. I see where you're coming from. I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
No, it's my bad. I probably was not clear. So I haven't qualified some of my questions very well, but no problem at all. Okay, that's helpful. Just for people up here to understand the numbers, that's a good place to start. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Gill? And I didn't mean Representative Riggins, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gill, has there been any forecasting on long-term homeowner applications in the future? I think I saw Wyoming demographic calculations that they're getting near the peak of our 65, and they're going to be trailing down a little bit. I don't know if that's accurate or not. Could you comment on that? Thank you.
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Riggins, not having the crystal ball on it, but we're going to gain some every year. We're going to lose some every year, just like the veterans exemption. But we did gain quite a few this year. I think we went from around 33,000. I'll have to get that number and I'll get that for you. But we were around 33,000 statewide last year that applied for the long-term homeowners. We were close to 39,000 this year. So it did grow. So 39 in 2026. So 38,552 is actually what we did. And the previous year was around 33. So we gained around 5,000 applicants in 1 year. I'm not sure if it was because they all of a sudden qualified or if they just didn't know about it the previous year. And that very well could be. So I think it's a mix of both. And I'm sure we lost some too. But it looks to me like every county was up from the previous year.
Represent. Follow up. Representative Storer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gill, I want to go back and look at the state assessed numbers on the comparison of state and local assessed valuations for the years 2025, 2026. As I recall, 2025 also was a reduction in state assessed. This is about $353 million. I'm curious what this actually represents. Obviously, a few counties are up, but several counties are down. And just trying to get my head around kind of what we're seeing on the state assessed valuations.
Mr. Gill, please.
Mr. Chairman, I think Representative Storer, if it would be okay with you, I think I can put those numbers together for you and split out the state assessed companies versus the minerals. And I think that might make it a lot clearer. And now that you bring that up, I think that would probably be a great way to change a piece of our annual report and actually show the minerals gain or loss and the state assessed utilities, railroads, airlines gain or loss. So if I could get back to you on that, Representative Storer, I will absolutely put that together for you.
Representative Storer. Thank you, Mr. Gill. Actually, that's a good idea because that is kind of one of the pictures that is hard to see. So thank you, Mr. Gill. I think that's a great idea. Any other questions for Mr. Gill? Representative Lean, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gill, while you're preparing that report, could you possibly provide us with obsolescence accumulative in 2025 August meeting for revenue? You provided us with some obsolescence for functional and economic breakdowns and just what those were per county. Could you also do that for 2026 so we can compare 25 and 26 there?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean, I could actually absolutely do that report again. Keep in mind that was not on state assessed properties because we use the income approach, and there's no obsolescence added to the income approach. The income approach has obsolescence already built in based on the income, the net operating income that those companies are making. So I absolutely can do that for the local assessed. Absolutely.
Representative Campbell, did you have a question? Are you okay? All right. Anyone else? Very good. Mr. Gill, anything else that we need to go over? Or I think we covered most of what we were looking for, but any last opportunity for questions? All right. Well, we'll have mercy on you then, and we will relent. How's that? Thank you, Mr. Gill. I really do appreciate all your hard work and taking good care of us here. God bless you. All right. I think we were going to, we had a few questions, I think, for the State Board of Equalization. If that, are they next on the list or am I out of order here? Next on the list? If that's okay with you, that'd be great. Chairman. Well, I want to thank you all for coming here. At least I had a few questions and hopefully we can, I will just assume some of our questions might step outside of the boundaries in which you can answer. So I guess what I'll do is I'll start maybe with my question or I'll ask the committee what questions you may have. I'll start with the committee. What questions do you guys have for the State Board of Equalization? And if no one has any, I'll at least start off with my questions and we'll start there. And then again, just let you tell us, push back where we need to go. Okay. Thank you. And I do appreciate you being here, by the way. So let me just take a moment. Let me just take a moment to thank you guys for taking the time to come and to be here with us. We really do appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, please.
maybe it would help if I introduce the board just for people that don't know who we are. I'm
That'd be
Jane
wonderful.
Wampler. I'm the chairman of the state board, and to my left is Marty Hartzog, who is the vice chairman. And to my right is Carl Anderson, who is the board member. And we're here to answer the questions that we can answer. Is that, you think I was a lawyer, but I'm not. So with that, please go ahead and we talked about it a little earlier. There are some that because of the litigation, we won't be able to answer, but we can talk about timelines and process and how we got to this point.
Chairman Moncler, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that. And that's kind of where we're at. And so if I'll at least ask a question to get it started, and then certainly the committee can jump in. But my question was really just around the 4% cap, kind of where we're at in the process discussion. I think a lot of us have read up and at least know at some point, but if you could maybe just summarize where we're at in the process and just at whatever level you can give us. And I understand there may be limits here, but I'd appreciate that.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, and I think the committee all received a copy of the report that we issued on June 11th. And that report instigated the litigation. We began our abstract hearings the next week. And when we began our abstract hearings, the litigation was begun by the governor, and he sued the board in June, and then we countersued him. And I think really probably the easiest way to do this is just to turn it over to the lawyer.
Thank you, Mr. Harzog, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Marty Hartzog, Vice Chairman. I've been on the board now 11, almost 12 years in March. And I think that the way to understand, if you're asking where we're at now, I mean, the report, if you read the report, and I would encourage everyone to, it's online. You can get online and look at our website where we have a link to the report. And I drafted the report, and Ms. Mockler did some editing to round out the corners. But the report was intended as kind of a one shot. It includes the record, how we got to the point where we felt we needed to push back formally. It includes all of the communications that we had with the legislature as well as the governor's office and assessors. A lot went into the report in terms of the timing. And then, of course, the laws included the analysis, the numbers that we were seeing. And so it's intended to be kind of a one-shot record and legal conclusion to support what we were having a hard time doing in terms of the certification. And as Ms. Mockler, Chairman Mockler explained, we had intended to sue in January, and then that didn't happen, and then we got into the abstract session, and then things were really a little difficult. But in terms of where we're at right now, the lawsuit is in district court, state district court in Laramie County, and the discovery is proceeding. Although there won't be a lot because the information is really out there already, and the parties are working towards a stipulation, which is just basically what can the parties agree to in terms of what the valuations are doing, which again is not really a mystery. It's the CAMA system. We all go to the CAMA system. All the assessors upload their values. Everything flows through the CAMA system. We can pull out any valuation, any property. We can run queries and really cross-reference and analyze any aspect of it. We have a statistician who does all of our work. And so between our statistician and Mr. Gill, who they're really the experts. And so right now we're working towards the court's ordered deadlines of pushing this to a final disposition in state district court. So I think that at this point in time, we're nearing the deadline wherein we will have to stipulate. And of course, if we don't stipulate, it'll still find its way into the court's record. Everything will be supplied through a dispositive motion of some kind. We don't anticipate there'll be any trial because really there is not a whole lot of fight or question about what the values are doing, how they've trended. And so really it'll come right down to the legal question. And that's the dispute about what the exemption authority enables the legislature to do versus the tax structure required in the Constitution. That's really the fight between the board and the state. And that's where this case will be resolved, is that tension between Article 15, Section 11, which says you have to have uniformity, you have to base taxes on market value and so forth, and the legislature's ability to, through an exemption, basically change that whole system. So I think that if you haven't seen it, you can also look at the court's ordered schedule, Court Hibben intends that he will have a dispositive motion hearing at sometime in early December. And that in 1 month, he will have a ruling of some kind. Now, that assumes everything goes kind of as we anticipate, and it really should. There's not a whole lot of I don't see anything that we wouldn't anticipate in terms of a process or evidence. There's really nothing that we don't see coming at this point. And that includes the state and the board and anyone else who's involved. And right now it's just the state of Wyoming, governor, and the Board of Equalization. So I hope I answered your question or as
You answered my question.
much as I could.
And any other questions from others? Representative Lean, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for joining us today. My question comes with your authority to sue the governor. Could you kind of walk me through where you find that authority?
Mr. Hartzog, please.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean, the law generally through the declaratory judgment action sets up the structure wherein a governmental entity can sue the state can sue a governmental entity. And that always concerns one of two things, an interpretation of statute or regulation and or an interpretation and application of a contract, either of which defines the rights of the parties subject to those, the contract or the statutes or the regulatory scheme. So the Declaratory Judgment Act is in the civil procedure part of the statutes, and it's been there for a long time. That's the authority that allows any state entity, assuming it has standing, whether it's a school district or a county or a state agency, to sue the entity if it determines that the statutes or regulation are not being applied correctly, or in this case, whether a statute violates the Constitution. That's what the Wyoming Supreme Court has says you must use. And so we were really always looking at the declaratory judgment action statutes to be the mechanism wherein the board would figure out whether the law was correct under the Constitution.
Follow it.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you talk to me a little bit about 4% and how you deem, or the State Board of Equalization is having a challenge with applying that? I guess that's where my consideration is coming from as a state legislator, is looking at the 4% cap. It's uniform across the board for 23 counties and applied equally through all assessments. What is the challenge for you to be able to certify a value on that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean, if I understood your question, the question is whether the cap, and all of this is set forth in our report, so I'm really just parroting what the report says. The problem is uniformity. This notion, and I think it is going to be the state's position, that it's uniform because everybody is under the same system, but you still are basically making two properties, identical properties, taxed at completely different assessed values. Now, your response might be, well, everybody's under the same system though, so it's uniform. And so you're in essence saying it's uniformly non-uniform, because you can't take two taxpayers and treat them, let's say that there's a 15 or 20% difference, and that's the case in some instances. 15 or 20% difference in value, assessed value. Let's say they're townhomes. You've now said taxpayer A is taxed at market, taxpayer B, identical property, maybe even neighbors, 20% less. Well, everybody's under the same system would be your argument. And even though they're not treated the same, it's fair because the system applies generally consistently. And so your argument, playing devil's advocate, the state's argument that there's a uniform non-uniformity is going to be an interesting question that the court will have to resolve. The problem with that is the system looks at the taxpayer. Can you treat two taxpayers that are for all intents and purposes identical, and give them completely different taxable values simply because of this policy decision to limit how quickly a property appreciates in value? And that's the question. And uniformity from the board's perspective requires that you treat identical or similar taxpayers the same. The system from the beginning of statehood always required that. And through an exemption, the cap has said, no, we're going to require that certain taxpayers are going to have a suppressed value. Newcomers or however another property is assessed at a higher value, they're not going to be treated the same. And so that's really the question is, can you square that with the uniformity requirements as the Wyoming Supreme Court has laid those out? And the court has very, very specifically in several cases, which we've cited, have said you really can't.
Oh,
Please.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what I heard you say in that dialogue was that the challenge is uniform application. Thus, would this court case then extend to all exemptions that the taxpayers that live next door to each other have a problem with market value because the markets are different in every facet of Wyoming, and that market values as a whole are creating an ununiform assessed value across the board?
Mr. Hartzog.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean, there's one feature of the cap that's the biggest problem. Because if you start to pull in all of the other exemptions, we don't have the same, we don't have apples to oranges. Other exemptions don't interfere with value. They simply say, we're going to carve this part off and say you don't owe this part on taxes. But what the cap does, which I said from the beginning and the report reiterates this time and time again, you're intersecting the valuation system with an exemption and saying, okay, from now on, your value is whatever it was last year plus 4%. You've now changed the core valuation structure that the Constitution and the laws have always provided. And you're now saying, and as Mr. Gill pointed, this is the problem, the cumulative part where you have successive years, year in and year out. We don't even necessarily need to know what the value is. If it's up there high enough, the value becomes nearly irrelevant. And it's the only exemption that does that. In fact, it's the only time the state's ever done something with an exemption that kind of interferes with the valuation structure. And so we really don't have the same problem with other exemptions because they don't interfere or intersect the valuation mechanism. They are kind of just on the top. You just take it off and you don't pay taxes on that, 25% or 50%, but there's no interfering with the constitutional valuation paradigm, which has been in place since, well, a long time.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Please.
It's been in place since 1988 when voters changed the Constitution. One last question that I would ask for this is, when it comes to the 4% cap, if the judgment was to go in your favor and that was to be removed, what do you anticipate that to do to the valuations that you're certifying?
Mr. Hartzog.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean, I think that you would have an immediate return where all properties are assessed based on that 9.5% applied to market value. The caps that were in place would be gone, and everybody would be on the same exact system. Now, they would still be subject to all of the other exemptions. This doesn't change any of that. Doesn't change how the 50% or the 25% or the initiative would apply. Remember, this kind of lies below. This is the baseline, and all of those exemptions apply on top of the capped values. But that's in effect what we would see. And when we look at valuations every year, we would know that all properties are assessed at 9.5% of of market value. And then the exemptions would apply as you've enacted them.
Other questions? Senator Ide, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, Chairman, Vice Chairman. So in the instance where your lawsuit prevails, is it retroactive of when that 4% cap started? And are those homeowner taxpayers obligated for that? Is it for the back taxes that they've saved? Just a
Mr.
question.
Herzog.
I don't know how the lawsuit reads.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, no, it's not cumulative, and the taxes are each year as it stands on its own. It's simply a return to how the evaluation structure worked before 2023, which is when it was enacted for 2024 tax year. And so, no, there would be no recovery or clawback of taxes. Counties wouldn't have the ability to, I mean, none of that would be part of how the ruling would be applied.
Senator, follow up? Follow up? Did you have a question? Okay. Co-chair, please. Take charge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I thought I heard you say we have two townhouses next to each other, exactly the same. And there's a 15% difference in the taxes. So my question is, where's the uniformity on assessment? If they're the same, shouldn't they be assessed the same? And shouldn't the cap affect them the same? That's my question.
It's hard talk.
Mr. Chairman McEwen, the system before the cap set up that every property was 9.5, which is statutory, 9.5% of market. Every year the assessors go out and determine what market value is. And the assessed value is 9.5, and then you apply your mill levy exemptions and so forth. And because of the timing of purchases now or an improvement to a property and so forth, there's a resetting. So what my example assumed is that, let's say you two chairmen own townhomes right next to each other in the same building. And you've been under the cap for 3 years. Chairman Locke, you've enjoyed, let's say you're 12, 13, 14% under the assessed value that you would otherwise pay because of the cap. Your townhomes are in demand, property's going up in value, but you've got that 4% cap. Chairman McEwen, let's say that you just move in, identical, neighbor in the same structure. And this is the same scenario I went through three and a half years ago in front of the revenue committees. Now you're at market because you moved in. You're a brand new owner. So that year you don't get the exemption. You're at 9.5% of the full market value. And your neighbor, Representative Locke, has got a 12 or 13% discount relative to market. You're paying 12 to 13% more in taxes based on that delta, that disparity, because you just moved in. Same property. The only difference is you just moved in. He has the cap in place for 2 or 3 years. And so the non-uniformity is that the properties are the same. You two, for all intents and purposes, are the same other than you just moved in. You're enjoying the same county services. There's not a single difference between you two other than the timing of your purchase. We could also do the other scenario where one improved the property one way or another. And that's the difference. You're assessed at 9.5. We can calculate what we call the effective assessment rate. You're no longer at 9.5. even though under the system you are, but in effect, because of the cap, you're now at 8.6, whatever it would be, simply because you haven't moved and you didn't just move in. And that's the problem. You have identical properties, a completely different assessed value for no other reason than you just moved in. And so the 4% cap has created two different tax liabilities for identical property, identical taxpayers, same neighborhood. And this notion that, well, we do it that way for everybody, that's the argument that I tongue in cheek, pretty accurate. You're saying it's uniform, but my response would be, you're saying it's uniformly non-uniform. That non-uniformity is kind of glossed over by saying, well, we're doing it the same with everybody. I don't think from the constitutional perspective, that's going to gain much traction. That's going to be a problem because we have some property owners that are under 5%, 9.5%. Some are under 5%. Some are paying taxes on under half of what others are paying only because of the cap, purely because of the cap. And that's, we've got, of course, all the data. We can show you county to county. We can do a breakout, pull everybody's property account up, show you how many people are kind of inverse in terms of that valuation relationship. It's going to be an interesting argument.
Representative Campbell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Arczyk. So are you saying that the 2023 legislature passed an unconstitutional 4% cap? Is that basically where we're at?
Mr. Hartzog.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, as we explained, and I argued in front of the committee back in 2023 in the sessions that would apply in 2024, the cap as written, we knew it was going to be a problem, but on its face, and this is a legal distinction, and we pointed this out very clearly in the report, it had to actually start to apply before you saw the results, before we could say this uniformity is not there. And we're seeing that fair market value is no longer the gauge because of how the cap works. And from an attorney standpoint, it's an as-applied problem. I always knew it was an as-applied problem. So let me give you an example. If you had written a statute that said market value is no longer relevant, we are saying full value is no longer a component of our tax system. Now that provision, if you put that in statute, on its face, we could say, whoa, the Constitution says that full value is the starting point for the system. You're saying in a statute, now it's not. On its face, we could say that is challengeable before we even apply it. It's not going to, we know that you can't do that. It's a black and white. But with the cap, you don't have that. Now you can see that what's going to happen is it's going to roll out and we're going to have a lot of uneven problems. We're going to see a lot of swings in values amongst identical properties, but it had to happen. It had to roll out before we could really see it. So we were not able to say at the time, you are enacting an unconstitutional provision. We knew that the outcome would very quickly show unconstitutional uniformity problems. And that was a distinction we made in the report. It was a distinction I made 3 years ago. I said, look, this is going to very quickly get out of hand. And we knew it would because that's the way it's written. It's going to. But now on its face, we were not able to say that you passed an unconstitutional law. It's a legal nicety, I guess. I've got to, it's one of those, it's kind of it's not something that you can just stamp and say, oh, that's unconstitutional out of the gate.
Follow up. Representative Storer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Hartzog. Perhaps as a follow-up to that discussion, looking at Article 15, Section 12, and what that allows the legislature to do to create an exemption to taxes and the language that's there. I think it begs the question, just because we call something an exemption, does it make it an exemption? Or is it, as you say, what we've done is kind of this intersecting the process of valuation that is something very different than just an exemption? Could you kind of tell us more about that?
Hartzog, please.
Representative Storer, it's a slippery concept, and the history of exemptions in Wyoming. Of course, I cited the cases that started talking about the first challenge to an exemption back in 1923. And Chairman Mockler and I have had interesting discussions. The exemption authority, as the Wyoming Supreme Court back in 1923, is fairly robust. But there is no ironclad, perfectly defined concept of what an exemption has to be. And so the problem, of course, from the board's perspective was using the exemption provision to basically rewrite some pretty pivotal provisions in the Constitution to basically kind of work around them was tricky. And in the history of Wyoming, in fact, you can go back and look at every single exemption passed from the beginning of Wyoming. In the history, they were always narrow, very specific, policy-driven. Even if they were fairly broad, they were pretty well defined. A governmental purpose, property owned by a city, property operated by a religious entity, property used as a hospital. Those kinds of things. They always had a fairly narrow, definable boundary. And the difference here was that the exemption was used to basically work around the full market value provision and say, well, we don't want the values to go up as quickly as we have, so we're going to call it an exemption, and we're going to exempt that part of it over 4% over the assessed value. So I think that it's an interesting use of the exemption provision that we had never seen in the past. I don't think you'll find a single exemption passed in the history of Wyoming that does really what the group of exemptions that started in 2023 do, where you're basically just carving off a whole swath of taxable value and saying all that's exempt for everybody. But is it? There's nothing illegal about using an exemption that way, as long as the Constitution, and that's really I call the Constitution the backstop. It kind of backstops everything you do as a legislature. You can pretty much do what you want until the Constitution says, whoop, too far. And so I wouldn't get too hung up on the concept of an exemption because the law doesn't say they have to be fit into a certain box. But you do need to be careful about how far you reach with them so that they don't, that you're not trying to do something that other parts of the Constitution say, that's a little too far. And of course, the difference here is it's 100% of residential property. I'm talking about the cap now, 100%. Every single property in the state of Wyoming could get capped. It won't, but it could. And that's an interesting concept as well.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that explanation, Mr. Hartzog. Well, given we don't know how the court will rule, I've looked at this and thought about just who is really benefiting the most from the 4% cap. And when you look at some of the examples, it is, I think, worth noting that where you have properties that are continuing to go up for a variety of reasons, a lot, those are the ones that are benefiting the most, and they're also very expensive in many cases. and just seeing what those numbers are coming out of Teton County. I think the question is, despite the constitutional question, there's a question of whether this is good policy or bad policy for the state of Wyoming. And I just thought I'd ask you if you have any opinions on whether that is.
Thank you. Mr. Hartzog, please.
Chairman, Representative Storr, not really. We're pretty careful about, I mean, we amongst ourselves will talk about good and bad ideas and so forth. But in terms of our jobs and where we really focus and it's just, you know, when Ms. Mockler and I sat down and looked at the question on certification, we really went back, and I did all that research went back to the beginning of the state. I actually went back all the way to 1868, which is where the state board existed first as a territorial county state territorial board of equalization. Its whole role was really, well, it was the Department of Revenue in essence for quite a bit of the statehood, but that equalization function. And so from our standpoint, it's just absolutely critical that we look at the values and make sure that everybody is being treated the same under the same system. And that's kind of where we stop in terms of what we look at. And that's why, of course, we have a statistician on our staff. It's all he does. And that's his 100% of his job is to run analyses and to work with the assessors to make sure that the mass appraisal system is being administered in a way that treats everybody the same. Not that, you know, we have an interesting case here and there where an assessor's practice might be a little questionable, but that's what we do. We then look at it through the Department of Revenue. We work with that assessor, try to make sure that everybody is falling within the same system. But on policy questions, not as much.
Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Hartzog. So you answered the question right there before you began your question there with her. Equal treatment is one of the, to me, seems to be your primary objection, I guess. Secondary probably is how much authority the legislature has in this regard. So I got to be thinking about, and you mentioned 4% cap on the class of property. So the subclass of property we created, Amendment A, provide that opportunity to do that. So would we argue that the subclass is also anti-constitutional in a way, because that's what carved out the owner occupied by itself? So would the general objection exist if that 4% cap applied to all residential properties? It would have to be that entire class of property, would you say?
Mr. Hartzog.
Chairman, Representative Riggins, I don't know. The state actually went through the process of passing an amendment to the Constitution that allows the state to do some reconfiguring within the class. And that's, of course, what you needed to do that. Whether that would create a uniformity problem under the Constitution, I don't know, but I don't think so. I think that because you've kind of plowed the field to do that, you can operate with a little more flexibility. Yeah.
Representative Riggins, please.
I only bring it up because we've done that by age, term of ownership, how many years we've had it, income. So we've created a lot of exemptions using not equal treatment. So that's why I pointed it out. So anyway, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hartzog.
Chairman, Representative Riggins, it's a wonderful point you make. And it kind of harkens back to what I mentioned in response to Representative Lean's question, that the exemptions by their nature, and I point this out in the report, all exemptions create a bit of non-uniformity, right? You're going to say, okay, you taxpayers owning this property, you are going to get this discount, whatever the case may be. So you've always, through an exemption, are going to treat everybody differently. Typically, they're very narrow, but again, the difference here is the valuation system. That is a hallowed thing under the Constitution, is in a sense. And if you want to really reorder that, it has to be done a certain way and not through an exemption. And again, the cap is the only exemption which restructures the valuation.
I'm going to sneak a question in real quick. Just so one of the things I just want to make sure I have this clear in my head, because you know that the Article 15, Section 12, pretty clear at the end, and such other properties as legislature may generally law provide. So it gives a lot of latitude, in my opinion. Just throwing that out. That being said, I do look at this, although you say I don't want to misquote you because that would be inappropriate, but you put kind of what you referred to as the relative assessment, or you didn't use relative, you used a term similar. So that being said, I would argue that the property value is still being assessed by the same. It's being assessed by the same system. The difference is, like every other exemption, maybe I should not say it quite like that, but similar to every other exemption, the assessment value is still the same, but now X amount is exempt. I would argue it's hard for me to say, oh, just because we put a cap, that's different than the 25%. That's different than this other number. You might say, oh, well, that significantly over time, it starts to create a larger number. I get that. I do get that. But at the end of the day, it's still, the property is still assessed, the value is still assessed, and an exemption is put in place for some amount of that assessment. At the simplest level, that seems fairly consistent with these exemptions, at least the way that I believe that law was written. So that's at least an argument I throw out there as maybe I shouldn't be arguing. We don't want to litigate it in this room. That was not the intent. So if I did say anything like that, I apologize right up front and did not intend it. But just to throw out my understanding of that law a little bit, that's kind of at least where the legislature was at. And I would still argue that it's still not clear to me. Okay, you say, well, it's a different type of exemption. No, the property is still assessed, and there's still an exemption for some amount of that assessment. And I would argue that's very similar to the others. And so you say it doesn't impact others. I'd like to understand better why it's not going to impact others, because I would say all of a sudden the broad latitude given to the legislature has just been taken away. This goes back to I would argue the legislature's ability to implement Article 15, Section 12 will be slashed by that. I would be impacted. Let me use better words. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Hartzog.
Do you mind if I weigh in?
Please.
Mr. Chairman, I know that a lot of us think like you do, and of course we pass the legislation, but we're not going to settle it here. This is in the courts now. This board is an independent board, maybe not totally independent because they can be removed by the governor, but they have acted as they saw fit. They've upheld the Constitution as to their oath. They take the same oath that we do. And now it's out of their purview. It's out of our purview. There is nothing we can do except for let this come through the courts, as it appropriately should. And they have an obligation to defend the Constitution as they see it. The absolute obligation. And we can keep trying to tell them that we don't think about the uniformity and what we did makes sense, but we're way past that now. It's in the courts. They, based on their expert opinion, have decided that this needs to be pursued, and I commend them, Mr. Chairman. I commend them
for upholding their oath and bringing this issue to a head, because this issue was discussed when we brought this to the legislature. It did not prevail at that time, but now it'll be finally determined. And I appreciate the board coming here. I just think we should quit berating them and arguing around the mulberry bush here, because it won't make any difference what we say today.
Thank you, Senator Case, and I appreciate that. And let me just say this. If we're coming across as berating you, that's not the intent, in all fairness. I will at least say from my perspective, if it came across as berating, it was not intended that way. I truly would like to understand the nuance of this at a level where I'm just trying to understand. So, Senator Case, thank you. And you're probably not wrong. We've probably gone long enough. That being said, I would like to give you the opportunity to respond. And again, there was no intent to berate you. We're truly trying to understand the issue at a level where we get it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I think that that's kind of where we were about to end anyway, in that we are really at the point where it's up to the court. And I think Mr. Hartzog kind of walked you through what the report says, but I would encourage everyone to read it. We've also on our website are posting all of the stipulations will be there, the court orders will be there, the briefing will be there. Everything will be online so that you can watch it as we go through the process. As Mr. Hartzog mentioned, Judge Hibben is hoping to get at the report, his response or his answer, his decision out within 30 days of the hearing. So at least going into January, you'll have an idea what the district court thinks. And then obviously whoever loses is going to probably take it to the Supreme Court. And I do think it's an issue that the Supreme Court needs to answer, because because as you're pointing out, Article 12 is the exemptions. And if you all need to know what your exemption authority is as well. And I think this is the only way you're going to get there, is if it goes all the way through the Supreme Court, we get an answer and it clarifies for you what is any other such exemption as the legislature may determine. What does that mean? Some of that will come into play with that. And as I said, it's pretty hard. You're in a waiting period, the same that we are. And but it's pretty critical, as Representative Lean said, there is a cost to this. If the exemption goes away or the cap goes away, we will bring all the values back to their full fair market value. And going forward, then you can decide how you want to go forward from that when you have an answer of whether or not this qualified as an exemption.
Thank you very much. And at the risk of cutting everybody off, unless there's an urgent question, and again, I apologize. The intent was not to come across in an attack mode. In all fairness, when I put the agenda on put it on the agenda, I truly just wanted to make sure I understood both sides of this, understood that. With that, my last question there really being the big issue, and you brought it up perfectly, Ms. Mockler. I appreciate that, which is we do want to understand the legislature's authority in this role, and it's kind of an important one for us to understand a little bit. But thank you. And again, hopefully we didn't ask our questions like we were trying to throw stones or darts across the room. We'll save
It does
that.
sound a lot different than some of our discussions. So with that, we appreciate, the opportunity to let you know kind of where we are in the process and how this is going to play out. And, the timing isn't, the courts take a while. So
Right.
it won't probably be till next summer till you have an answer from the Supreme Court on how this is going to play out. So with that, thank you. And we're going to hit the road.
Perfect. And I just want to thank you guys for coming. I really do appreciate you taking some time with us. I think it was a great help for everybody to hear all these different pieces. You read the documents, but sometimes you kind of need this conversation a little bit to fully appreciate it. But thank you. And you guys have a safe trip home.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to recognize Jane Mockler served on this committee. We served together in the Senate, and Senator Peck was our chairman. And so she has a little bit of foundation. Good to see you, Jane.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for your service. Appreciate it. All right. Well, at this moment, I'm probably behind on schedule, so I'm an expert at that part, being behind, or are we fairly close, actually? Where are we at on this section? Let me catch up there. What's that? All right, so we will open up for public comment. Those who would like to speak on this topic. Those who aren't completely wore out already and want to speak on the topic, we'd love to have you come up and anyone online? Wow, we got off easy. Let's see. I don't know if there's any opening for committee directives, but any conversation from the committee on this topic or anything related to this entire section? Nope. Representative Riggins, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm only gonna, Senator Case pointed out this determination that will ultimately be made, and a lot of our proposals we have are kind of tied to that determination that we have coming up in the bill drafts. So I guess I'm just curious how we'll approach that, because acquisition value, for example, it has real value if there's a cap, right? So I'm just laying that out. That's going to tie to some of our bill drafts we have going forward here today.
Other conversation, please. I don't mean, I'll give my 2 cents on that, but I want to leave the conversation open for everyone. So I'll at least respond. From that perspective, I agree that there's literally no question that this has the potential impact on a lot of what we do. But I think for some of the bills that we're pushing forward to, we've actually got what we would argue are constitutional amendment changes that almost have to be made for some of these at least. And that will, but I do think consideration of this in the argument, in the discussion, you're absolutely right. It's going to have to be there. In fact, although we didn't get too deep, and I believe the State Board of Equalization was fairly clear that this impacts other exemptions differently. One might argue that this change, depending on how it's interpreted, it may or may not be the case on how it impacts other exemptions, because I think it might have been you that made the case fairly clearly that there's so some of these exemptions are similar. So it's going to be a court thing. We'll just have to see how that all shakes out. At least that's my 2 cents on that, and probably too much of a 2 cents there. Anyway, any other conversation, guys, from the committee? If not, we'll go. Representative Ide.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator Ide. Sorry, I just demoted you to representative. My bad, Senator.
Just a quick comment. We could solve all of these problems in these lawsuits with a full repeal and a constitutional amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. All right. If there are no other questions, we will end this section and maybe we'll take a 10-minute break. No, you need to. I need you guys. All right, we'll go ahead and start in on the next section of the agenda here. Let's see here. Let me get to the actual agenda so I know what I'm talking about. There we go. Commercial property taxes, and I think the Department of Revenue is first. Thank you, Mr. Gill, and you're always up here in front of us, so so we'll try to keep it light a little bit, and so we keep moving.
Very good, Mr. Chairman. Ken Gill with the Department of Revenue, Administrator of the Property Tax Division. If it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, I thought we'd walk through some of the materials that I provided for the committee.
Please, sir.
I'll start with it's a worksheet or a spreadsheet of the commercial and industrial real and personal property assessed value. I will say these are all locally assessed values. So I just thought I'd better preface with that. What I did here, I went back to 2020 and I went through 2026 and gave you the percentage change. And these are assessed values. I apologize, I did not break this down into taxes, Mr. Chairman, but we can certainly do that for you too if you wish. You'll notice between 20 and 21, a lot of negatives in certain counties. Overall, it was a negative 1%, goes up in 22. And then we take it all the way over to 2026 and the percentage change is less than 1%. And I would attribute that to probably the $75,000 exemption that this body passed in was it last session or the session before, I believe it was. So that's where I would attribute most of the change there. This includes industrial property and it includes both real property and personal property. So, Mr. Chairman, I would stand for any questions on that worksheet.
Questions for Mr. Gill on this? Representative Storer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Gill. I did a little number crunching to just kind of see the changes from 2020 to 2026 for each county, just to see if I could help me understand what was going on. And so not surprisingly, my county Teton was up about over 100%. I know that there's been a lot of new development. Hotels and whatnot have been getting built there, as well as the valuations going up. Albany County was also up about 100%, and I was curious about that. Laramie County, 60%, over 60%, I assume related to some of the data centers. And I guess Sheridan also. So I just wanted to understand kind of where those big increases are coming from, and if you've taken a look at that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Storer, great observation on that. I didn't mention before, with these numbers, these numbers aren't a great comparison from year to year because we do have new properties that are built, properties that are taken down, new subdivisions happen. So yeah, looking at it at this aggregate level, you're right. As you build new hotels or as you mentioned, data centers, it is going to skew those numbers for sure because there has been new construction. So I'm happy to look into those certain counties that you mentioned or any as to why, and maybe look at what was built or what was taken down in either case. And I can absolutely research that for you, Representative Storer.
Other questions for Senator Ide?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Gill. This combines commercial and industrial. Do you have off the top of your head the total valuations of commercial versus industrial that we're looking at? Because they're taxed at different rates, and just to look at that to see, why why not have industrial in the commercial property class at the same valuation? I think that was all done back in 1988 as well. If you could clear that up and why they're separated, and what those valuations are individually. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, I don't have those right off the top of my head, but I will absolutely get those during lunch for you. I do have access to them, so I can get you the breakdown between commercial and industrial, local assessed, statewide. So I can absolutely get those. We've received all the mill levy reports from the State Board of Equalization. So I actually have them in our annual report that's almost done. So I absolutely can grab that for you at lunch. The tier, obviously, we know that Wyoming is a fractional state assessment state, right? So minerals are valued at or taxed at 100% of their value, industrial at 11.5%, and then basically all other, but we know we have two more tiers to go. We have the other tier, which includes commercial, agricultural, and then we have the residential real property tier. So the 11.5, I've looked back in history on that. I've read a lot of articles from 1988 of what happened. At that point in time, they wanted to go 11.5. There was a movement to go 11.5 across the board, except for minerals. And then there was a movement to maybe break out commercial and residential from the industrial class. Of course, at that time, the Constitution changed and it said that the industrial cannot be more than 40% higher than all other, nor, and it has to meet both qualities here, nor can it be more than 4 percentage points. It sure is in the legislature's, should the legislature make a decision to change industrial to 9.5%, they absolutely could do that. And then the residential real property could go lower than the 8.3. And then perhaps that sub-tier that was mentioned or passed in Amendment A could actually go even lower, as long as it doesn't go lower than 40% of 9.5%, nor more than 4 percentage points. So yeah, absolutely. And the legislature has always had that tool. The legislature has always been able to change that assessment level of as long as they stayed within the constitutional boundaries of any of these tiers or fractional assessment states.
Yes. Senator Ide,
Mr.
please.
Chairman, yeah, thank you for that. That was good information. So hypothetically, if industrial if the legislature moved it back to, what more commercial and all other at 9.5%, so technically we could go from 8.3% to 6.3%. Would that be correct with that 4% variance that is, you can't go beyond? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, as long as there's not 40% in between that 6 point whatever percent and the 9.5. So yeah, theoretically, and I have a spreadsheet that gives all of the formulas there where the legislature, should they choose to change that level of assessment, could go.
Representative Lean, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You talked to us a little bit about the $75,000 exemption, but what about the depreciation scales that were put in place? Could you talk to us about how that's having an effect on these numbers?
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean, we won't know that until next year, because this was the first year we actually froze that trending factor. So we'll actually be able to look at that next year to see what the difference is, where they would have been with the trending factor and since the trending factor froze. So we won't know that until next year, actually.
Follow up. Senator Ide, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Another question on this commercial industrial valuation from 2020 to 2026. Looks like valuation is up $1.4 billion approximately over that 6-year time span, which is 38%. Is that outside of data centers? Maybe throw that off in the corner. Are you seeing growth in industrial and commercial, or is that purely just values on existing, or a little bit of some backdrop on that if you have any of that information. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, I think it's all of the above, right? I think the market value has gone up. We're an ad valorem assessment state, right? According to value. So I think that's part of it. The market has driven up. And I think we have seen growth in certain areas of Wyoming. There's certainly areas that have not grown commercially or industrially, but there are areas that have. So I think it's all of the above is the best answer I can give for that, Senator.
Sure. Senator Ide,
Yeah,
please.
just follow up on that, Mr. Gill. There again, throwing data centers out, where are you seeing growth in industrial and commercial around the state? If you know that, I'd be interested to know. Thank you.
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, I wouldn't be able to answer that, but I think our local partners on the ground would be able to answer that a lot better than I could.
Representative Lean, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for my own clarification, does this number reflect the state assessed industrial values of our railroads and such?
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean, no, this is only locally assessed.
Follow up on that?
Representative,
questions?
I'm
Oh, sorry.
sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Gill, please.
Excuse me.
No worries.
Representative Lean, I actually have numbers here, and I have copies for everyone if you would like them, that break down the state assessment non-minerals. I actually got those just this morning, so I do have those, and it might help Representative Stoer's earlier question.
Mr. Chairman, if Mr. Gill is able to provide those, I would like to have them.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Gill. And Representative Riggins, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gill, I was more, we've seen the increases, but I'm somewhat fascinated by the double-digit decreases in some of our eastern counties. And is that reflective of a personal property being diminished or industrial? Is there a little explanation for that? Because you go to 23 and you see where they made all those gains and they basically evaporated. That's any explanation for that?
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Riggins, that's a great observation. You know, as we've talked before, we have three approaches to value, right? We have the market approach, which would be sales comparison, using sales to value a property. We have the income approach, looking at the income, potential income, subtracting expenses to come up with the net operating income for a property and we value using that. We also have the cost approach, and we use the cost approach pretty effectively in the state of Wyoming. And if you'll remember, we hit some pretty heavy inflation during that little time period there that probably drove those, because it's kind of a reaction to the past, if you will. So I think part of it would have been the cost approach. Part of it could have been new construction, obviously, too.
Any follow-up? Other questions, guys? This. I'll just throw out just more of a statement than anything. The reason I think we're, and I don't know, we probably really just started to scratch the surface of understanding these numbers a little bit. But I think one of the concerns or one of the discussions is, have these numbers gone up, understanding your assessment approach and all that? The cost approach, for example, starts to concern me, for example, just using that as an example, because have these properties incomes, these businesses incomes, have they gone up the same? This is the piece that I think we're having trouble connecting the dots on. And I realize we didn't ask for maybe all of that detail, but I do think that's one of the deeper questions is, does this make sense in terms of our business's ability to generate revenue for the companies, if you will? And I'll oversimplify it with that statement, but that's one of the things. I don't know if you've got a clear picture in your head on what we would do to kind of maybe show that picture better, but I'm not sure that's completely clear here, but thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the question. I think it's something that maybe I could get together with you on this side and work on for the committee. to get it to you. So, and kind of drill down, as you will, into that data a little bit. So if we could take some opportunity after this meeting before the next one, and maybe we can drill down for you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. That's a huge help. And I probably didn't make myself clear on that for this, but thank you for the help. Appreciate it. All right. Senator, please. Did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just sorry to jump in. We're kind of finished here, but you brought it up on the $75,000 personal property exemption. Maybe you've given it to us. I don't remember. Do you have a spreadsheet on what those numbers look like on the $75,000 exemption and how that saved the taxpayers' businesses money? Thank you.
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, I did not bring that this time. I do have it, and it will be in our annual report. And I will make sure that everyone gets a copy of that, but I did not bring that for that. I apologize.
For you, Mr. Gill, next time we'll roll in the supercomputer with all of the data that I'm just kidding. Please, you had some other stuff to go over, right?
So, Mr. Chairman, Director Fanning just brought me some numbers I provided him, so.
There you go.
Yeah.
So the director's got you all, you watch out. He's going to start producing all these great numbers for you. Anyway, go ahead, please, sir.
Mr. Chairman, he's got my back. He should have hit me in the back of the head, but yes. We do have numbers here. Assessed value wise, for local assessed properties, it was about 818 million in assessed value that was exempted for the $75,000 exemption on personal property. And on state assessed properties, it was around 62.5 million that was exempted.
Sorry, what was the local assessed number? 8?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it was 818.4 million.
And then 62.
And then 62.5.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Senator, did that help?
Mr. Chairman, just a quick follow-up. Can you explain the discrepancy on the number is so much larger locally than it is statewide? Just a little clarity there.
Mr. Gill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, it's the number of companies. We have a very limited number of companies that we assess at the state versus our local county partners.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You may not have these numbers, but I'm curious to know, did we see an expansion of businesses in the state of Wyoming when this $75,000 exemption came out?
Mr. Gill. Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean, I can't answer that question, but I'm sure there's some economic folks that could probably answer that. It's only been in place for 1 year. So I don't know that we saw a jump in business because of that exemption. Perhaps in a couple of years, maybe we will.
Thank you.
Representative, follow up or no? All right. Other questions for Mr. Gill on this? You have other stuff you need to go over? Yes.
Mr. Chairman, if you'd like, I do. There's one more sheet that was in your packet, and it's appraised value of select commercial properties. You had asked me last meeting to kind of, let's drill down a little bit into some individual properties. So what I did, I looked around the state to see some well-known retailer pharmacy stores that are throughout the state, some well-known big box retailers that are around the state, and a well-known hotel chain. And you can see by county, the percent change from 2020 to 2026. What I don't account for in this, though, is if that property went through a major remodel, if that property acquired more property around it, they bought land around it. So I'm not really, it's not apples to apples. Still, it's a little apples to oranges, but it gives you an idea of where those values have changed over the years. And some are up sometimes, some are down sometimes. Not sure, exactly every case scenario of these types of stores, But I just thought it would be something interesting for the committee to take a look at.
Question for Mr. Gill on this one. It's a lot of numbers, but this was a tricky one because some are up, some are down, right? So it's very tricky to follow, but absolutely.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if on the side, if you ever want to know what stores I was looking at, I can tell you, but I
Okay.
didn't want to announce them over.
No, no, that's probably the right answer, my friend. So, no doubt. Any other questions for Mr. Gill on this? And was that the last thing we had for you there? Any other questions? So just in short follow-up, I do think maybe that a broader discussion maybe would help us understand this. I mean, this is actually a starting piece of it at some level, but maybe trying to understand that that bigger discussion might not hurt. But you and I'll give you a call and we'll follow up on that.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. I would be happy to work with you and co-chairman to look at that and get the information that you exactly want.
Anything from you, sir? All right, very good. Let me go to my agenda.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
And Oxeter, could Mr. Gill share that list with us again privately on the side, like you said? I'd like to see it. Thank you.
Sorry, Senators, could you say that again? I apologize.
I'd like to see Mr. Gill's list on the side privately. Thank you.
Oh, very good. Okay. Very good. Thank you, Senator. Appreciate that. And by the way, those of you who are online, and I might have been ignoring you, if I am, I'm very sorry. So somebody flag them for me and keep me in line. If I've missed you, I apologize. All right. I think on this topic, we're probably at public comments. So please. Hello, how you doing? It's good to see you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dixie Huxtable, Converse County Assessor, and here with some of my fellow assessors. And I just wanted to clarify a couple things on the report that Administrator Gill gave you, the commercial and industrial, real and personal, just as a comment. Just as a reminder, in 2023, wind farms switched from being state assessed to locally assessed. So that would be an increase in this locally assessed valuation, not new facilities necessarily. It just went from being state assessed to locally assessed. So you would see an increase in the locally assessed value statewide. Also, that is a year where we saw some significant increases in cost tables due to, as Administrator Gill talked about, that the cost tables provided to us by the state took some increases after the COVID time. Also, just a couple of comments. If you have some specific counties that you had questions about, you could probably tie that back to some new industrial projects. For example, I know Albany County Assessor is here and she could share that there's some new industrial facilities, as in a wind farm in her county, which explains some significant increases from one year to the next. And we can certainly address those on an individual basis if you care to. I just wanted to make sure we understood that, as Administrator Gill said, apples to apples, oranges to oranges, you got to be careful when you're comparing year to year on how the process changed between state assessed, locally assessed, cost tables, et cetera. And certainly new construction and new businesses certainly impacted it as well. So with that, I would stand for any questions.
Questions? Senator Ride, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Huxtable, thanks for being here. When did that happen on the wind turbine stuff going from state to local?
Ms. Huxtable.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, that was starting with 2023 tax year. So in 2022, they were state assessed on a different chart than this one. And for 2023, they would have been included in this valuation.
Just follow up.
Yes, Senator Ride,
Yeah,
please.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. So up until that time, they were always state assessed, all of the wind turbine farms that we have. And why was that changed? What was the reason for it?
Ms. Huxtable.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, I want to clarify that it's independent power producers. So you do have some wind facilities that are regulated companies that the state still assesses. but starting with legislation that passed in 2022, the assessment responsibility switched from state assessed to locally assessed. It was not clear in the statutes at that time. There was some concern both on the state level and the county level as to whether the state had the authority to do those for the independent power producers. And so there was a lot of discussion and legislation that passed to make them locally assessed, as are other industrial facilities in our counties, gas plants, et cetera, that are locally assessed. So that's when the timing came about, and that's how it changed. It's just, they were still industrial. They were still being assessed using the C3 methods of approved theory. It's just that they were locally assessed instead of state. And so when you're looking at splitting out state from locally assessed, you just need to bear that in mind.
Thank you.
Perfect. Other questions for Ms. Huxtable?
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask an unfair question. So I'll just start there, and you can say, well, I don't have that data. So just if you could estimate this, I've always been curious, the impact of this cost versus this, how much revenue they can create kind of concept. What percentage of these commercial or industrial businesses do you assess by cost versus the other methods, if you don't mind, if that's something you kind of have in your head? I understand it's at best a fairly broad guess, but.
Mr. Chairman, good question. I don't have the percentage. I don't have the numbers. I can tell you the types of industries that we get that, because bear in mind, income approach requires us to get income data. There is no mechanism currently in statutes for us to get that. Typically, we get it when they want to appeal their value. It's not something that is typically given to us up front. Now, there are more industries that are starting to provide that, and I'm going to use some examples of rental buildings, motels, facilities, those kind, and certainly to some degree our industrial facilities, the larger plants where we get more information from them. But it is something that they have to provide willingly to give it to us. So we don't have that information on an industry wide level. Now, some counties that have more income producing properties like the motels, like the rental buildings, have a better access to some of that information. So some counties may be using it more of the income approach in their reconciliation process than others. For my county, it's very limited. Taxpayers don't seem to want to give me their financial statements unless it's going to lower their taxes. And then, of course, when they give it to us, we do consider it. We do income approaches. Low-income housing facilities is one that we get information on. In my county, I get some on some motels and apartments, but it's very limited. So I don't have a good percentage. I don't have a good number for you. I can tell you that it is driven by the taxpayers' willingness to provide it to us because we have no mechanism to get it without a subpoena. So it's just limited to what they want to give us.
Other questions? Representative Lean, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for joining us today, Ms. Huxtable. You kind of triggered an interesting thought about low-income housing. Could you talk to me about where those fall in our tax reporting? Are those under the commercial guidelines? And if they're showing a for-profit, is that then taken into account with the exemptions given to them?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean. So yes, they are reported as commercial, and that's statewide. As far as exemptions, I'm not aware of any exemptions. So when you use a cost approach to value, there is depreciation and there's physical, functional, and economic. And so typically when I see a low-income housing financial statement, we're looking at using that income statement to determine if there's any economic obsolescence or functional obsolescence or physical appropriate. So it's not an exemption, it's a calculation in the process. Cost approach requires us to look at that. Income approach is what we typically use to determine if we're in the ballpark or what kind of obsolescence needs to be applied. So when you get to low income when you get to the low income housing, there's other things to look at as far as the income approach, because you may have some tax credits that need to be considered, which is totally different than a non-qualified property. So there's a lot of moving parts to that. To say what that percentage is, I don't have it. And to be clear, we would not consider that an exemption. We're going to consider that a process of the valuation and to determine if the obsolescence that we have applied is appropriate. And then, of course, looking at market sales as well to determine if that obsolescence is appropriate. In the case where we don't have income to substantiate, we will look at market sales. So that's how it's determined. And I don't know if I answered your question completely, but I'm sure happy to visit with you if you have more questions.
Just a follow-up, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, and when it comes to obsolescence, could you remind me, is there a table that you find within Marshall and Swift, or are those all administered via local assessors? Do those come from the county? Could you just remind me how those are applied?
Ms. Huxtable.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean, the physical depreciation based on time, that's a chart. That's a table that comes from Marshall and Swift, depreciation table based on the economic life and effective and physical life of the property. When it comes to functional and economic obsolescence, those are factors that are determined by the assessor. There's not a per se chart to follow. That's where we use that other information as in income approach or market sales to determine what kind of obsolescence might need to be applied. A functional may be a structure doesn't have a bathroom and every other house sells with a bathroom. So those are the kinds of things we'd be looking at to determine what did that sale, everything else being consistent, what did that sale say would have been the functional or the economic factor. So that is up to the county assessor to determine that, or the appraiser involved.
Thank you.
Other questions? Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Huxtable, do all businesses apply for that personal property exemption? I mean, I don't think they do. I think I know some colleagues who don't have, they have a business, but they don't have, I don't know the extent of their personal property.
Ms. Huxtable.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Riggins, another great questions, because the exemption for the person's personal property does not require an application. It is an automatic exemption that's applied. But remember, Wyoming is a self-reporting state. So once they've filed their rendition, which they are required to do, the exemption did not change the reporting requirement. So in our opinion, they're still required to report. We process the rendition, determine if their assessed value or their fair market value is 75,000 or less, and then apply the appropriate exemption. In many cases, it wiped out that entire account, at least in my county, and I'm sure that that's true across the state. So based on what they reported determines how much of that exemption got applied. Were there taxpayers that maybe thought they had less than 75,000, so they just didn't report? Absolutely, I believe that that's true. From the assessor standpoint, the amount of resources it required to go validate all that, since this is the first year, I can't tell you how many of them actually did, but am I going to go track down a taxpayer that probably had $15,000, $20,000 worth of personal property knowing that it's going to be exempt? I had a few other things on my plate. So that did not happen in Converse County, I can tell you that. We tried to track down as many as we could, but the self-reporting, self-exempting may have happened.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what about, so when you have a new business being built right in your front yard, so do you typically see filing a report because you drive by it every day or something like that? Or is it even somewhat random in that regard?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Riggins, and I believe this is true probably statewide to different levels. We do track new businesses through the Secretary of State's office and when there's new filings, and typically try to send out a letter to those new businesses that have officially recorded that they're a new business in our county to determine and send them usually an introductory letter to say, we see your new business. Don't forget you have a requirement to file a rendition by a certain date. Now, how many of those actually come back, I can't answer that question statewide. I can tell you there's some counties that are very active about it. Fremont County happened to be one of them in the past that did that. That's how we found some of those fraudulent reportings. But typically, most assessors are going to send some kind of a letter once there's a new business in town that we've established and ask what type of business they have. Again, now that there's a $75,000 exemption, if it is a office, that their business is a service, customer service office, not a retail, just a customer service. We're still going to send that letter, but are we going to follow it up if we think they've got maybe one computer and one desk in that office compared to a construction business that just opened up and has several mobile machinery things sitting out there? It's going to be treated a little bit differently. But I do believe that most county assessors do follow up with an initial letter to make the taxpayer aware that they're responsible to report to us. Following up may be a different matter depending on the type of industry it is, to be truthful.
Any other questions? Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Huxtable. I remember a couple of years ago, we had the whole laundry list of all of the personal property that gets taxed in the state. And, you know, they had saddles and tack on there. In your experience in Converse County, did all of the cowboys get free from personal property tax in Converse County? Or did you have any situations like, I'm just curious. Yeah, thank you.
Ms. Huxtable.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, I did have a lot of taxpayers in Commerce County that got zero tax bill because the exemption covered up all of their reported assets. How many of them reported those assets? I can't answer that. The personal property that's taxable, if they're using that tangible personal property in their business to generate revenue, it's taxable. That's the way the law reads. The first 75,000 is exempt based on what the legislature did recently. So they are required to report it. We're required to process it and then apply the appropriate exemption. Yes, there were a lot of taxpayers in Converse County, as there were statewide, who ended up not paying any personal property or will not pay any personal property taxes for 26 because the 75,000 totally wiped out. And it wasn't item by item, it was account total. So depending on what was reported and what the total fair market value of that aggregate exemption or assets were, the saddle may not have been taxable because it got reported, but it was within the 75,000. I can't quote you exactly what my percentage is, but it was a pretty high percentage in Converse County. We went from probably about 1,100 personal property accounts down to probably 200 to 300 because of the exemption.
Other questions? Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you're talking about filing the report, I think I've seen that inventory report. I think it was shared with me from a business, and it can be pretty intensive. And I'm just, is it too complex? Not so complex as just doing the calculations, but when you have about 15 pieces of old equipment that you haven't touched in 15 years, and they're wanting to know every piece of bit of it, it certainly doesn't encourage participation, I think, because of that. Could it be improved and simplified for the owners?
Ms. Huxtable.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Riggins, certainly we're open to the discussion of adjusting it if it needs to be adjusted. The way the law reads now in our interpretation is all of the assets that you own and use for that business are taxable. So depending on how well you itemize it in your business determines how detailed it is on our report. So once it's been reported, then we will send out to that taxpayer the next year the copy they reported from the year before so that they can do additions and deletions, which makes it a lot simpler than after the first initial reporting. They can mark off what's gone and add, there's a separate page to add anything that's new. So try to make it as helpful as we can to the taxpayer. That initial rendition can be quite lengthy. I can tell you I have agricultural taxpayers in my county that send me a 30-page rendition. I'm pretty sure that taxpayer does it. I'm pretty sure his accountant does, because he hands it off to his accountant and they send it back to me and they report every wrench, every saw that they have on that ranch. I have other ranchers that report it as a cumulative, this is what we purchased in 2025. And we go with that accumulated amount. So it's very different depending on the taxpayer and what kind of reporting they have internally, I believe. If there's some way we could help make it better, we certainly would be willing to address it. It's installed cost. And so sometimes they forget that the freight, the installed cost of that equipment gets lost. But we're sure happy to offer any discussion we can.
Follow up, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So depreciation, equipment stuff, 100%? I mean, once you get to that point, do you have to list it or you still listed, and how's that work?
Ms. Huxtable.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Riggins, as I said, none of these changes to the law changed the reporting, at least to our perception. So yes, you're required to report it. Based on the changes to depreciation for this last year, as Administrator Gill said, we'll figure out how that actually played out starting with next year. But based on its economic life, once the piece of equipment reaches its economic life, end of its economic life, the trending stops, but it still depreciates, and we have a floor according to the rules of a 20% floor unless there's evidence to support something different. And there are some industries where we can support, and there has been litigation to support that maybe the floor is not 20%, it's something higher if it's still in use. But that mechanism for that the legislature put in place was for the trending, but it was still depreciating based on its age, economic life. A lot of factors go into that, and I'm happy to sit down with you and walk through that, but it's probably a little bit more complicated than we can do right here today, but I'm happy to do that with you.
Guess I need to turn on my mic. Any follow-up? You okay? Well, Ms. Huxtable, thank you for taking some time to bring some focus on this. It's very helpful. Other public comments on this section? Commercial property taxes. Any other public comment? Anybody online? Any questions online, since I have horribly ignored my online folks? I'm sorry. They're not too mad at me. I could see that with a thumbs up, so we're okay there. All right. Well, we were expecting more excitement around commercial property tax than this. No, I'm just kidding. So I guess we will close public comment and committee discussions. What's your pleasure? All of those good things.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask if the committee's will is to have a bill draft drafted to make industrial taxation 9.5%. Given our equal taxation laws that were brought to our attention, the lack of GDP in the state of Wyoming, and the constitutionality of fair taxation, I believe that this would help our industrial partners to be able to spur some growth in our state. So I would ask for a bill draft to move industrial taxation to 9.5%.
So is that a motion? I'm going to say it's a motion, and it's been seconded. So moved by Representative Lean and seconded by Senator Ide. Discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry. I wasn't sure. You were hitting the button, and I was just trying to make sure I was going to.
I guess I would like to see the evidence that a lower tax rate would actually spur economic development in the industrial space in the state of Wyoming. I don't think we've been presented with that evidence to date. Thanks.
Other discussions? Senator Case?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of observations about this issue. One is that most industrial development occurs in Wyoming because of some unique aspect of Wyoming. We have a monopoly on some production or something. So it's a significant source of tax revenue. And of course, I don't need to remind the committee that property taxes support local governments. And it's not a a funding source that comes to the state. It mostly supports schools. So it's an important revenue source for that. The other unique aspect about Wyoming is that we do not have an income tax. We do not tax revenues from entities that come to Wyoming and find them a superior place to process or mine or what have you. So the fact that it's 11.5%, which is marginally above the other rates, I certainly concede that. But when you realize we don't have an income tax or a gross receipts tax, it kind of is in a good position to support these local services. So I don't think we should go down this road. And the evidence of whether a change in the tax rate would stimulate production, if you think that most industrial activities occur in Wyoming because of locational constraints, because we have a mineral or we have another resource here, changing the marginal tax rates won't change the amount of production. We looked at that with respect to our production taxes on oil and gas and trona and coal, and we determined that that didn't make any difference. So I would caution going down that road.
Other discussions? Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to add, we've had that discussion on minerals a lot about lowering taxes for enhanced oil recovery, multiple discussions about using this very technique to encourage production in that field. So it's not too far off the mark in this regard either, I don't think. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other comments from the committee?
Mr. Chairman, Dan Docksetter, could I have a little more background from the sponsor on that percentage that she made? Representative Lean.
Representative Lean, please.
Mr. Chairman, if you go to the Wyoming Economic Analysis Division, you can find all of the state GDPs that are produced there. And when you begin to read those, you see a substantial decrease over the last 4 to 6 years and what that's looked like for our state economy. And so we know that when you reduce burdens on industry, that they have the opportunity to produce more jobs and they have the opportunity to grow within our state. And so what does that mean when we're looking at large industrial projects coming to our state, whether that's the form of a data center or the form of an expansion by railroad? We're looking at the opportunity to give these folks a reduction in taxes to be able to sustain the job growth that is needed in the state of Wyoming.
I don't believe data centers are.
Senator Case.
I do not believe data centers are industrial property. I think they're commercial property.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Lean.
Look at changing that, but
We do have a bill draft that asks for a change for data centers to be changed from commercial to industrial in our packet for later in this revenue committee meeting.
Other discussions? Senator Docksetter, did you get what you needed, sir?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please. Representative Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Many states do consider data centers to be industrial enterprises, and they're taxed at that rate too, and it's actually more than are not.
Other conversations? Senator Ide?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm on and for this amendment. As Reaganomics said, if you want less of something, you tax it. If you want more of something, you subsidize it with taxpayer money that nobody wants. That's why we have so many wind farms here. I think this gives us more headroom on if we got this lower for lowering the assessment on residential property. If we lose that 4% cap, we could potentially lower the assessment on the residential property as well. So I think it's a good tool. And as Representative Lean brought up, I mean, if we're looking for, fairness across the board, I don't know why we punish industrial properties more than commercial and residential. So on for the bill. draft. Thank you.
Other discussions? All right, so let me be clear. Question's been called. I don't see any other comments from the committee. Let me be clear on it's a bill draft to reduce industrial from 11.5 to 9.5%. Is that correct? Just making absolutely sure we're clear. So as long as the committee's clear, we'll start with a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I would say the ayes have it. So this will be a bill draft. I do want to ask that,
I'm sure the ayes have it, but I'd like to be noted.
absolutely. So can we do this with a show of hand, or with that request, we need to do a voice, correct?
No, it's just a draft, but let's just do a show of hands.
Oh, show of hands. Let's do a show of hands on this. All in favor, say aye. Or sorry, raise your hand. All opposed? All right, it looks like we've got 3 opposed. I'm sorry, I didn't see you online. I apologize on that, but okay, they were ayes?
Yes.
Okay, both ayes. Thank you, guys. I'm sorry about that, guys. I apologize, but it looks like the ayes have it. What is there, 14 of us, 12 to 2-ish, or no, 3, sorry, 11 to 3. So, all right, so we'll get a bill draft. Department of Revenue, I would ask in preparation, I do think the committee needs to see these numbers in the industrial impacts and numbers in a lot of detail in the next meeting. So I did want to throw that out there. I think that's going to be a real key component of us understanding better, is that a 9.5? Is it something else? What the number might ultimately be. But I definitely think we'll want to have a session very focused on that. Thank you, guys. Appreciate that. And got the thumbs up from the people in the room that know things. Excellent. So that finishes the commercial, let me see here, commercial property taxes section. I didn't miss anything, did I? LSO, you guys will keep me on the straight and narrow. Very good. So we'll slip into the next item, which is property tax for wind and solar facilities. And I think the Department of Revenue may have some info, or maybe you're just perfect. All right. All right, Mr. Gill, back up here in front of us. And the morning isn't even done yet, so.
That's right, Mr. Chairman. Ken Gill, Department of Revenue, Property Tax Division. Mr. Sackett just handed out something I put together very quickly over the weekend, so I have not double checked these numbers exactly. And one of our issues in the CAMA system is that we've assigned electric generation companies to the same abstract code. So I can't break them out except for by name. So I tried the best to make sure that this was either wind or solar. So, and I think we're going to split that abstract code out so that we'll have one for wind, one for solar, one for nuclear, possibly one for hydro, maybe, we'll split those out. And it will help the Department of Revenue calculate the wind generation tax. So every year I have to reach out to our local county assessors to get those assessed values to make sure I'm not including a solar facility currently. So these are values that I pulled for 2026, their assessed value. And then I use the average mill levy. No, I did not use the average mill levy. These are actual tax dollars from the accounts combined. So these are actual tax dollars statewide on wind and solar facilities. And Mr. Chairman, it's a pretty simple chart here. It looks like in 2026, the wind and solar companies, properties, folks that hold those assets will pay around $17.5 million in taxes.
Mr. Chairman.
Question for Mr. Gill. Representative Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was wondering if a copy of that was provided to folks who were not able to attend in person.
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lucas, I apologize. No, it was not. It was not part of the packet that was submitted to LSO a couple weeks before. I actually pulled these this weekend, but Representative, I'm happy to email you one right here when we go break at lunch.
Thank you.
You bet. Representative Worf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was my understanding was we didn't tax solar. Is this just the property that we're talking about, not the actual generation of? So we're talking just solely about the property associated wind or the solar?
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, great question. So you're correct. We only have a generation tax on wind currently. And this would be the ad valorem tax on their property, most of it being personal property, if you will.
Representative Worf, please.
Does this also include like internet type stuff? I know we had that question in my county. Is it, because I know it changed from the county to the state doing that tax. So does this include those properties, or is it in a different category?
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, that is a really good question. This is all locally assessed. So this is going to be your IPPs. I do not have a breakout for wind or solar that is state assessed, because keeping in mind, we've discussed multiple times that the state, when we assess a property or a company, we assess the entire company, whether it has situs in Wyoming or not. And then we take the portion that is in Wyoming for that company. So yeah, this does not include any wind or solar that we are currently assessing at the state level. This is all local.
Well, that answered my question, so that was helpful. For some reason, I slipped a bit on that one, but you probably said it when you started and I missed it. But other questions for Mr. Gill? Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One county that I don't see listed on this list is Platte County, and I know that they have a very large wind and solar project coming in through NextEra Energy. And I'm curious to know that as that large project gets up and running, will that be locally assessed or state assessed?
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean, I believe it will be locally assessed. I believe, unless it becomes a investor-owned utility company, that the state would assess, but I believe it's an independent power producer. There are definitely folks in the audience here that can answer that question a lot better than I could.
All right. Other questions? Thank you, Mr. Gill, for getting this information together. This was, I know we kind of threw this topic at you at the last minute anyway, so I was we were trying to dot a lot of I's and cross some T's, but that was very helpful. If there's no other questions from Mr. Gill, I actually think this is, I think that was it. I think we are just going to public comments on this one. So please, we have any of our folks want to, into the public to comment on this, and do we have anybody online? Okay, so in the room first, no one online. Going easy on us, it looks like. All right, so we will close public comment on this, and committee discussions, and what's your pleasure, sir? Oh, Mr. Gill, you thought you'd escape. Well, we'll reopen that conversation. Representative Campbell, please fire away.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I noticed that there's a conflict, and I just wondered if you could clarify that. Where in Chapter 35, wind and solar is classified as industrial and everything, but under taxation, it's listed as agriculture in 39. I just wondered if you could explain the difference there.
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, all of this property right here that's on this sheet, it is at 11.5%. So it is industrial. And like I said before, Mr. Chairman, most of this is personal property, considered business personal property. So, but it is at 11.5% for electrical generation.
Sorry, and I may follow up.
Yeah, quick.
Oh, sorry, Kevin, please, or
Thank you, Mr.
Representative Campbell,
Chairman.
please.
Wondering how, because I agree, but we're talking about the footprint, just actually of the turbines and all that. Everything else is zoned agriculture, correct? We're just talking, when we're saying that everything here that is taxed is taxed at 11.5%, but there's a large area that is still affected but not taxed, and that is where I get a little lost to where, how do we, is it just the footprint of the turbine itself is industrial? Or, because where I was asked is, for example, if I don't know, a Pronomine was to dry out the surface of the soil 5%, they would be penalized as such for damaging the soil. A wind turbine can dry out the whole, not the turbine itself, but the field can dry out the soil 5%, and it's still listed as agriculture. I guess I'm trying to find the balance into where that cutoff is, if that makes sense.
Mr. Gill, please.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I'm sorry, I totally missed your question before when I answered. You're speaking about the land around the wind farm or the solar facility. It's going to vary statewide. Yes, certainly there are some that the land surrounding these turbines is considered agricultural. They're grazing it. And of course, in solar facilities, I think that's going to vary too. I think a lot of times on solar facilities, they're fenced and no animals can go in there. So more than likely, they're going to be industrial. The wind, if it is wind property that is state assessed, that land lease is capitalized and is industrial. Now, if it's locally assessed, it is going to vary, absolutely. But I think that would be a policy of the legislature of what you would like. Would you like the footprint of the turbines, the roads, things like that to be industrial? That certainly is a policy decision for this body. But I would also say, if we are going to treat the wind industry like that, the turbine piece, the footprint, the roads leading to it as industrial, then we probably need to do the same for all of our industry partners out there, because those roads are not being grazed or that sort of thing, nor where the wellhead is. So certainly a policy decision for the legislature to make.
Just a quick question, because I heard something that I don't know that I grasped when you first presented this. So I apologize. You did this assessment not include the land for these windmills, or was this, I thought you said this was just the personal property tax component. And so I'm sorry, I probably missed that when you presented this, please, if I heard that wrong.
Mr. Chairman, great question. Most of this is personal property. I believe there was a little bit of real property, but it was very minute in this case. So most of this was personal property.
Okay, thank you. That's clarification. Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My good colleague brings up a good point, and so I just want to very directly ask you for our oil and gas partners that operate on agricultural lands. Those are currently under agricultural standing when they're taxed. Is that correct?
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean, that is going to vary a little bit. We do have something that's called in lieu of production, property tax in lieu of production. So 40 acres, let's say that you own 640, and in one of the quarters you have a well. Well, that 40 acres is going to be exempt from local property tax in lieu of the production that it's bringing in. So it can vary a little bit, but I would say most of the time it probably is agricultural surrounding that. Not all of the time. A lot of times those are fenced off if you've been out to those sites, so they can't graze on it. but more than likely that's being exempted from local property tax in lieu of its production. The roads leading to it, I don't know if, and we have local partners here that could tell us, and I'm sure it might vary by county, whether they're taking those roads out of production or easements even out of production. I don't know that answer. I think it will be probably a mixed bag across the state and depending on every situation.
Other questions for Mr. Gill? Senator Ide. So
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gill, yeah, follow up on all of that conversation. Explain that again to me. Say you've got a well site, pump jack on 40 acres, and you said that 40 acres would be exempt from ag property taxes. Am I correct? I mean, what if the spacing is a 640 on that one well? I mean, is the whole 640 exempt? No, just the 40-acre well site. Is that the minimum or what? Thank you.
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, that is written in statute as 40 acres. So, and it's in lieu of production. So there's no local property tax taken in, but in lieu of its production tax that it's bringing in.
Okay, other questions? Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gill, when you mentioned the 40-acre, are there other applications where that is? For example, I'm familiar with like measurement stations and stuff out on ag land, and certainly no pipeline right away because you can graze right over the top of that. But in those instances, it's fenced off. Are they treated any differently, or they just depend if they're not small enough to address, just leave it as ag and leave it alone,
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, if it's not producing an ag product, typically it's not agricultural, typically. A weigh station or the home site where the home is on that property, that's not producing a property and it's at market value. So now there is something that passed back in 2013, 2014, where the land underneath those outbuildings that support the agricultural business, that land is actually considered producing land. That passed back in 2013, kind of an unusual because that land underneath that building is not producing an agricultural product, but that building might be storing hay. So that is something that the legislature did at that time.
Senator Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In most of those cases, these are fenced off, chain link and et cetera. So, and they have a specific easement agreement with the landowner. So are those easement agreements ever considered as the measuring stick for what is going to be termed industrial/commercial?
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Riggins, I think it's going to vary on a case-by-case basis. Like let's say a feedlot's not producing agricultural product. The land is not, right? Something fenced off that's not being used for production, that assessor's probably making an adjustment for that.
Representative Riggins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Just to clarify, and I'm not really speaking about the landowner's property, his operation, to me, I consider that all agriculture. So I'm thinking independent companies where we have all these easements on oil field facilities and natural gas, and where those easements are very specific. I can tell you, like, this is where you drive and this is where you park. So there's no disagreement between the landowner and the operator about what is and what isn't accessible.
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to say that a majority of the time, the assessor is pulling that out of agricultural production and listing it appropriately, whether it be commercial, industrial, or whatever the case may be.
All right. Any other questions? Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Gill. I'm going to go back to this to where let's say for state land, if a wind farm or a solar farm on a state lease, let's say just for simple numbers, this lease is for 1,000 acres for this wind facility, yet only 40 out of that 1,000 actually have anything on it. But that full 1,000 acres of state land or whatever land has been taken out of production for this. How does that equate?
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, that's a topic that's coming up this week or during this meeting, right? Governmental exemptions. So you bring up state land and it's being 100% used for a wind farm, let's say in that case. So if you remember correctly, the legislature said agricultural use on state parcels is exempt and is a governmental purpose, right? But we haven't defined the other pieces yet. So I think that's a topic for the very near future.
You only thought you escaped the first time. We brought you back for double the treatment. No, just kidding. I'm going to assume there's no public comment since we've kind of reopened this, but no one online, I'm guessing. And so I would, committee, which pleasure. Is that lunch? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I have had an LSO draft a bill. It's a working copy of 27 LSO 145. What this bill does is it would look at the leased land for wind turbines. And what it would do was if this bill does, or if the land does not make at least 50.1% of its income revenue from agricultural, then it would be assessed as industrial. I'd like to move that we have LSO do a formal draft of this bill.
So it has been moved? Let's see. So it's been moved. This bill draft that before you has been moved. Is there a second?
Is it possible to see that bill draft?
Can you?
Mr.
second?
Chairman, yeah, if it's okay with Representative Brown who requested, I can forward it out to the other committee members here.
Do we want to give everybody a couple of minutes to take a look? So we've got a motion. And the question is, do we have a second? Okay, Representative Worf seconded it. And everybody take a moment, read the bill and see for any conversation or discussion by the committee. So in short, if I'm interpreting this correctly, this would give more specific guidance on use of the land or how local assessors. Now, at the risk of crossing a line that maybe I shouldn't, how this might change the local assessment process, I would be, is committee okay if maybe we ask Ms. Huxtable, is that something you have any insight into, have thought a little bit about? Is that okay with the committee if we maybe bring Ms. Huxtable up and ask some questions? I don't want to put you on the spot. If I am, you could. Oh, you probably do need a copy of the
I don't
bill.
have a copy of the bill.
Oh, no, we're sending you in blind and with, sorry about that, Ms. Huxtable. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I apologize for that. But the concept, as I understand it, as looking through this, is that if the land is not producing at least 50.1% agriculture, it would be assessed at the industrial rate. And I think I said that correctly,
That's correct.
Representative?
Mr.
And not
Chairman,
knowing how you do it, I think that's part of what the discussion might be.
Mr. Chairman, respectfully, I do need a little bit of time
Of course.
to review this,
I
but
apologize.
let me lay out a little bit about agricultural land. So it's based on its productivity, its capability to produce is how we value ag land. So I think there would be some logistical issues with this on this. Number one, getting the information from the landowner on, we're back to that reporting of income, where they're getting their income, how it's being assigned to what land may be difficult. There's a lot of moving things going into my head here right now. So we would typically look and see if an agricultural person wants ag status, they apply in an affidavit format. And upon the request of the assessor, they produce documents showing that they are generating revenue equal to or to the land's capabilities. So looking at the land, depending on if it's grazing, irrigated, dry crop, would determine what that productivity should be based on a normal year. And we would look at that ag producer's documents to see that he's producing that capability, that amount capability. In this case, I'm not sure how we would get that information. Number one, how would we determine, so a rancher shows that he's running 100 head of cattle or 500 head of cattle, where do you allocate that sales price of those cattle to which piece of land? I'm just thinking of all the logistics that would go into this. Finding out what the income is from the leased land from the wind farm is probably easier to get if they're willing to provide it. Again, you're going to have to give me some mechanism to get that data. It sounds pretty simple on paper that you could calculate this, but I think logistics of getting the information would be pretty difficult. And then allocating that income to the appropriate piece of land may be even more difficult to substantiate. But for ag property right now, that's how we determine if they qualify for ag. And then it's valued based on its productivity capability. So I think what you're saying is they would have to show their actual income off of that land from all sources. And then we would somehow have to determine if the agricultural production was 51% of the total income they got off of that land. I think that's what you're trying to ask, Representative Brown. I think there's some logistical issues with how we would get that data.
Mr. Brown, Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Huxtable, trying to form this in a way of a question. So I think that's exactly my point, first of all, is that agricultural land being assessed as agricultural is much lower rate of taxes. And so we look at someone taking advantage of this land for another purpose. And that purpose in this case would be wind farms. Now they have made it an ability for themselves to make a greater income off of this land, but it's not for the purpose of agricultural. So wouldn't you agree that this would be an appropriate way to look at this land and to assess the value of the land rather than in agricultural into an industrial rate?
Ms. Huxtable.
Chairman Locke, Representative Brown, I certainly believe that it warrants discussion and some looking into. So here is some of the issue is that and I have wind farms in my county. Obviously, you can look at and you can see Converse County has wind farms. And the majority of those wind farms in my county are on private land. They are not on state land. That is not true across the state. In a lot of other counties, those facilities are on government-owned land. So that's a different scenario totally than what I'm talking about with private. The lease between the wind farm and the private landowner is their private information. Okay, we don't have access to that. And so I don't know exactly if they're leasing the land on a per acre basis, if they're paying on a royalty basis. I suspect, based on history, it's some of both. Until it's actually producing, it's probably leased on some sort of a per acre basis. And then after that, it's on probably generation, some sort of royalty based guideline. how do I determine what part of that generation came from that tower sitting on that 40 acres or that particular legal description? I can go out there and I can see those wind turbines turning and I can see cows grazing underneath it. So from my perspective, it is being used for an agricultural purpose. It is grazing. Whether the wind farm was there or not, they'd still be grazing it, and they are currently. I mean, I can show you lots of pictures where that happens in my county. As far as determining what % of their income from that piece of land came from the sale of the calf versus the wind turbine turning, I don't know exactly how we determine that. I don't know how we get the documentation to support that on either side, my side or their side, there being the wind farm. Is it worth a discussion and reviewing? Absolutely. I think it's something that we should look into and talk about. I'm just not sure that right now, with all other laws being where they are, that we have the tools to get this information and be able to enact that. Certainly there's time to work on it, but, and we're certainly open to discussion. And should it be taxed as industrial? That's a policy decision that you all can make and we will administer to the best of our ability. But as Administrator Gill talked about, I feel like I have to treat all industrial fairly consistently. So do I need to go? I can tell you in Converse County right now, the roads that go to that oil well are being taxed as agricultural if it's on privately owned land. If it's on state land, it's not being taxed at all because that's the way the law is read right now. So if we were to say we're going to tax all of the footprint under industrial property as industrial, then I feel like I would have to look at not only the footprint of the wind farm, but all the footprint of the coal mine, the uranium mine, the oil, the gas, the water disposal facilities. All those would need to be looked at, not only the land that they sit on, but the footprint of getting to them. So it opens a broader discussion than I think we all think about, but I'm certainly willing to come to the table and talk about it and see where we need to go with it from a local administrative point.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Huxtable. Currently, when we look at oil and gas, the leasee of that land, the landowner, they get a very small percentage of the production of that well. And so the footprint of that compared to the amount of land that is taken up by wind farms is the footprint is very small. And so is the income for the landowner when it comes to oil and gas. They're looking at a percentage, I believe, and Representative Riggins could probably help me here, but I believe that's 3 or 4% of the production of what that well is what the landowner gets. In comparison, when we look at the large amounts of income that is being brought in by leases of land for turbines, we're looking at a completely different scenario. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Ms. Huxtable.
Mr. Chair and Representative Brown, I'm not privy to a lot of the income that people have from these different facilities, but I can tell you that there is on the oil and gas side and the mineral side, besides the royalty from the mineral that's coming out of the ground, there's also damages, surface damages, all those kind of things that the landowner receives, just because my family's been involved in some of that. So I do know that there are other sources of revenue from those industries when they put a road on, when they put all those kinds of things to the oil wells. Also with the wind farms, absolutely, you're correct. They're generating a different sort of revenue. The wind generation, whether it be from a lease perspective or from a royalty of the generation. How they should be taxed, how that land should be taxed, I think needs to be considered uniform across all of them. We may be talking different amounts of land, certainly different quantities of land, but I think they need to be addressed, in my opinion, fairly uniform across all those industries.
Representative Lean. Oh, sorry, I missed this side.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know it's not in this bill draft, but just thinking about fairness for all industry, I'm trying to place where we've got data centers. I know they're currently taxed as commercial. Are you aware of data centers in the state that are paying agricultural rates? Because I know in some counties they go on agricultural land.
Ms. Huxtable.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lee, I'm not aware of that. To the best of my knowledge, if it's private land, it's being taxed based on its highest and best use. If it's government land, that would be a different perspective. And I truthfully don't know where all the data centers are sitting across the state. I know if they were in Converse County, if they were on private land, it would be based as the use of the data center, whatever that classification turns out to be.
Follow up. Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Huxtable. When we were talking about revenue in this draft versus easement payments and production, I think there's a lot of different variables in that. That 51% trying to measure that. And when you're talking revenue, I mean, just the revenue that the landowner received for that easement. Is that what we're talking about? Because revenue doesn't equate profit. So I think this is a kind of a difficult calculation to make to see if this is really apples to apples and so on and so forth, especially with comparing it with oil and gas operations. They've been fine tuning that for about 100 years now. So this isn't have been fine tuned like that. And those discussions usually come to a clash between the two parties. For example, when you come to an easement, I would think I think Mr. Gill mentioned that there is a small property tax, industrial assessment with these wind farms, like the roads and so forth. But what about, to me, if I was a landowner, the only portion of land I couldn't use in a wind turbine field is if he said, I can't set anything within this certain parameter. I have to leave him access for that. And if I construct something there, I can't do that under this agreement. Other than that, it's all accessible to me. Now, I don't know what that would look like if they have those arrangements, but I know that footprint is usually made as small as possible if you're in the oil and gas side, so that it can be used for whatever the landowner wants it to be used as. So, and I agree, that's private information. I don't know how you would ever get them to release that. So I just think, I think this is a difficult task, and I don't think it's fair to make the assessor's task until you're a lot more defined in what this means transactionally. So
I would concur.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to throw something else in there now. Cell towers that are leased on private property, they get a 30-year lease. Are they being assessed any different than a wind turbine?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stiver, have to think about that a little bit right now from my perspective in my county, because I have both, where the cell tower owns the land and that's taxed as industrial or commercial, depending on what the purpose of the tower is. If it's leased, the land is typically taxed as the land surrounding it by the landowner, the deeded landowner. So in most cases, probably agricultural. Could be in some cases commercial, but in most cases it would be agricultural. So again, it does depend on who owns the land. More and more of those cell towers are buying a 1 acre piece of land underneath it, and then that gets taxed according to what the cell tower classification is. But have both currently.
Thank you.
All right, other questions? Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I mean, thinking about taxes should be equal for property similar properties should have rough taxes, kind of along the discussion we had earlier this. How can we justify having a higher level of taxes for a 1 acre fence place that is owned by one person, and yet if it's owned by another person, how can it be different? How can you do an agricultural rate on one and a commercial or industrial rate on the other? When it's the same property.
Ms.
Huxtable.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, if you're talking about the cell tower that I was just talking about, because that is owned and used for a commercial business and it's fenced, it's got a different highest and best use. Typically, the ones that are owned, that are just leased are not fenced in. You got cattle again grazing underneath and around those cell towers. So typically when you see them fenced out, no different than you would see a commercially fenced property, the use of that property has changed. It has changed from being agricultural. It is no longer producing a product for that ag person to use. It's fenced out and used for commercial. I don't know that I have any of them that are classified as commercial that are not fenced in and have a different highest and best use. If that was the question, if I misinterpreted the question, help me out.
Senator Case, please.
Mr. Chairman, I think we're on track. I mean, you're saying in one case it's actually used for agriculture, and in the other case it's not. And that's how you base it.
Correct.
I can go with that and agree with you. But are we sure that we don't have those fenced boundaries and that all the fenced ones are industrial, commercial, and all the other ones are ag? We're not, are we?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, I can't state to that across the state. No, I cannot. To the best of my ability in Converse County, we're that way, but I'm not going to swear to it either at this particular point.
Yeah, but they've got a darn good assessor over there in Converse.
Senator, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Did you have a follow-up? Oh, okay.
They have a better assessor.
Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Huxtable, how do they determine what the highest best use is? Is there how is that chosen? How is that dictated? Can you tell me?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, there's certainly some education I can walk you through on highest and best use. We have classes where we're trained on that. What is the highest and best use of that land? You look at physical restrictions, political restrictions, regulatory restrictions. What is its highest and best use? And what is it capable of being used at? So it's not a simple answer. You got to look at all the different factors that involve it. But once it's fenced out and it's no longer capable of producing, in this particular case, of being used for productive value for an egg, its highest and best use is not egg. It's now the highest and best use, which its purpose when it was purchased typically is for an industrial commercial purpose. That's not to say that they couldn't take the tower out and graze a sheep on it, but it would be whatever the physical and political and legal restrictions are for that land's highest and best use.
All right. Any more questions or that I think we need to move on. Hey, listen, I'm first time in a long time. I'm actually ahead of schedule by 5 minutes, maybe a minute at this point. Anyway, I'm just kidding everybody. I didn't mean to stifle conversation. Any other questions for Ms. Huxtable? Thank you, Ms. Huxtable, for taking some time, and sorry to dump it on you right here in front of everybody. Other conversations in the committee, any other questions? I believe we have a motion that has been seconded, and any other conversation on that? And let's move quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for the sponsor of this, I just like to ask, why is this only for wind? What about solar? And does this bill unintentionally move us towards an income-based tax that we'd have to present to our Department of Revenue or our local assessors?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Lane, my understanding is, and I've checked into this, that with solar, in those cases, those lands are already fenced out to where cattle and other animals cannot get up to those. And so those are already assessed at industrial.
All right. Other questions or discussions? And if not, we will move on to a vote. All right. So we have a motion on the table to use this as a bill draft. There may still be some green fields on what we do, but it would move a bill draft forward. So is everybody clear on the bill draft, what it is? Okay. I think we've said it, but I want to make sure everybody's comfortable. And if we are, let's just vote. All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Let's go ahead. The chair is in question. So all in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. All right. All right. So it looks like it looks like the noes have it. All right. So no bill draft on that one. Okay. And I think that closes out our morning. Actually on time. So any other quick conversations before we break for lunch? Committee, and if not, stand in recess.